Hey, thanks everybody for joining Blurred Book Club on this first Sunday in November. Today we have a special guest. It's always a special guest, but this young lady is an incredible writer, and I don't need to tell you that if you read Spook Lights. Looking forward to get into it with her. We've talked this. I'm talking in the green room, and I think everybody's going to be happy with this interview and this process because she's an amazing writer and has been very gracious and humble. But first and foremost, let me introduce my co-host, a lady that leaves no introductions. She's been a regular on Royal Book Club, and I'm happy that she's here to join me with this interview process. Constance, a little bit about yourself and what's going on with you right now.
Hey, I'm Constance. I am an author of speculative fiction, and I'm just so excited to talk to Eden today because Spook Lights was such an inspiration. Um, I was writing Black Beauty, which is horror, and I don't usually write horror, and then I found, or Spook Lights was given to me, and I was just like, well, the universe opened up and gave me what I needed when I needed it, and it was Spook Lights by Eden Royce. So I am all fangirling right now. Squeak!
Yeah, it's an amazing collection of short stories. And without further ado, let me bring aboard Eden Royce. Eden, thank you for coming today. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? How'd you get into writing, and what was the motivation for Spook Lights?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I got into writing years ago. I was young, 5 or 6, and the local newspaper had one of those complete the sentence contests where you could write in and free off and you won a prize and it was published in the newspaper. I think my mother still has that newspaper clipping somewhere. But it was you go into a dark attic, what do you find? And I think at the time I wrote that there was a TV and I watched Bugs Bunny or something like that. But I've moved on to slightly scarier things since then.
Slightly, yeah, right.
Slightly scarier things. The motivation for Spook Lights is my hometown of Charleston, South Carolina. I grew up with aunts and great aunts who were hoodoo and root worker practitioners, and they would come by the house and they would tell stories of things that happened during their day, and they were always fascinating to me. So I wanted to bring that to life because I haven't read a great deal about people of color as main characters in books set in my hometown of Charleston. We were always secondary, sometimes even tertiary characters that may or may not even have affected the plot of these stories. So I wanted to make sure that those stories were told from the point of view of a person and or people of color in a horror setting.
Okay. Wow. So, and the thing, and Constance actually has the first question, but the thing that's so, I think unique about your writing is there's always like a romance with the environment, with the southern environment, just with the way you describe it. The ambiance, and you feel like you're there, whether it's your feet getting stuck in, the moist earth, or the way you describe and the way you describe the people in their dialect. So, after having said that, Constance, you have the first question. Go ahead.
I think that was such a perfect way to put it. There was a romance with the environment that I'm like flabbergasted. That was such beautiful language, Thelonious.
Well, maybe I should write that down.
Can you? I guess you. Would you like to add anything to that, Eden?
Well, I think the gothic form of horror is very atmospheric, and it almost becomes a character in itself. And that's part of the reason I love Gothic, that sort of creepy, disturbing horror, as opposed to some of the more in-your-face styles of horror. One of the things that I wanted to really put into the book was a Gullah Geechee, which is a nationality, a group of people descended from the first slaves who were brought to this country. And a lot of times we were isolated in certain parts of North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, and a lot of the traditions haven't changed a great deal from that time. So I wanted to incorporate some of the Gullah language and some of the practices and maybe even some of the superstitions that I remember from stories that my grandmother shared with me. So she was such an amazing storyteller, and I wanted to be able to put people who maybe haven't even heard of Gullah, maybe haven't even heard of Geechee, or even been to the American South. I wanted to make sure that they felt what it felt like to be there, to have your feet stuck in the mud, to have those rivulets of sweat run down your back and not be able to do anything about it, to know what it felt like to try and grip something but have it sliding out of your hands the tighter you try to hold on. So I wanted to be able to have readers get a sensory experience when they read Spook Lights.
And the vision that your words paint, whether it's rivulets of sweat running down your back into your pantyhose, the noise that your foot makes when you're trying to step into the mud, just the landscape that you paint, I was like, wow, this is writing. So thank you for sharing that with us. Um, and I didn't really have another question or segue. I just want to make that comment because I'm not trying to dominate the time because I know Constance has the first question, but I just want to offer that.
I don't mind sticking on that for a little bit longer because it was such an important part of the book. If it wasn't for the imagery, it wouldn't have been the same book. And so I feel like it should be talked about a little bit because I'm from Oklahoma, and a lot of the things that you discuss and you describe in the book, I've never experienced. And it's just like, and so to read it and then get immersed in that culture and to meet these characters, I really appreciated it. My grandmother was from Alabama, but we never heard any stories about the South. Only stories that I've heard, about the South and African folklore pretty much came from TV, and it was filtered through I guess a white person's perspective because it was usually directed by a white person or written by a white person. And so to read the story about some of the South and its folklore from an African American woman, and then it be so beautiful and so descriptive, was it was wonderful. It was wonderful, and it really inspired me to write more, to use setting as a character and not just as a background.
Right. And this is why we need to have different voices, behind a camera and holding the pen. Because the POV that you write from, even though you write from like the male perspective for a few stories, I just really appreciated the female's POV as much because the intimacy that you shared, whether it was clothing, whether it was brassieres, whether it was how rivers of sweat, so no one ever. You don't get that usually. I'm gonna say usually because I don't want to discount everybody when a male is writing a female character because they don't have that experience as far as I know. I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. But that's what I really appreciate. I like those little details that like you tie into the character and understand what they're going through.
I think it really does help get a sense of a character to even read maybe one or two lines of the thing that they comment on or that they focus on when they're in the midst of a challenging situation. So there are going to be just one or two small ideas like your blouse clinging to you like a frightened child that may not always be something you want to spend lots of wording on, but choosing the right turn of phrase sometimes can really give you a better sense of that character and their motivations and where their mind is in that particular moment.
Now, words matter. Words are powerful, and if you use the right right words, I mean, you affect the lives, and you can make somebody happy or sad, and your work, your short story is a testament to that.
Okay, I will ask my question then. So, one of the stories that stuck with me the most, being a mother and having a teenager who half the time, make sure she's not listening, won't talk to me. And then I have an 11-year-old son, and I kind of see him starting puberty, and he gets mad, and he won't talk to me either, but not as much as a teenager. So the story with the mother whose son was evil, but she stuck by his side for the most part, even though he was sketchy. It, it
Yes.
it stuck with me the most. So I want to ask you, if you were in that situation, what would you do, and what inspired that story?
Well, that story is called Home, and if anybody isn't familiar with the term, it's another term, especially used in the American South, for essentially a funeral service.
What was the term again? I didn't quite catch it.
Homegoing.
Oh,
Homegoing.
right, homegoing. Yeah.
So a lot of times you won't see on pamphlets in the American South the funeral services. It will say the homegoing services of this person.
And that's not
Mm.
that's also in African American churches too, because my church, we don't say death, we say homegoing or homecoming or
Mhm.
anything to home. So death is not a word that I don't
That
know,
we
a lot of churches, a lot of African American churches use.
It isn't, and I think that's because we want to put a positive spin on that for those that are still here mourning. The motivation behind homegoing, funnily enough, it was a story that I probably wrote in the shortest amount of time. I imagined what would it be like, and I know ladies like this that have children, sons, daughters, that have done illegal things, been in and out of jail, and they are so dedicated to those children. And I wondered, what does it take? Is it a real reaction? Is it real support, or is it a front when you're around other people and when you are in your own head thinking about things, when you're lying in bed at night? Are you truly absorbing all the information that's been presented to you about this person? And can you still hold on to that support? Can you hold on to that kernel of belief that maybe it's a phase, maybe they can change, maybe they're going to get better? And I wondered, would someone faced with a child that has committed murder multiple times, would they be able to find it within themselves to still support that person? And that's part of what I love about horror is it doesn't always have to be a slasher in your face type of horror. Sometimes it can be psychological. And for the mothers there, it may be the worst nightmare that they can face. My child has committed these atrocities. Can I really still, deep in my heart of hearts, still love and support and provide nourishment to that person, knowing the things that they've done? So I think that psychological horror can be extraordinarily powerful.
To me, that might have been. I think I agree with Constance. That might have been my one of my favorites. I mean, because he was still torturing her behind the scar plexiglass that has seen a lot of fights. Again, your words were amazing. But he said, "You gave me everything I want. This is your fault."
Mm.
Right? And he was gotten married and having a conjugal visit, and I kept thinking back to Charles Manson, how women want to marry this, and I was like, you know, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, because what this character is talking about and discussing happens in real life, and it's not that big of a stretch.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Um, when you do read about those articles of true crime, where sometimes they even have TV shows where they reenact scenes from true crime, so they're sometimes astounding at what people will do and the lengths that they will go through. And sometimes you can find horrible, jaw-dropping stories outside of fiction, and you just have to open your newspaper.
Oh, I totally
I
agree with
agree.
that. Yeah, I totally agree.
Most of the stories that I write are inspired by just crazy things that happen in real life. That's like, I have to write about this. I'm gonna have to write about this because this is kind of crazy. I'm gonna have to spin it into fiction because it's crazy. And then with homegoing, because it made me ask myself, I've always tell my kids, if they do anything bad, I'm not gonna be like that dedicated, crazy mother who stands by their kids through no matter what and makes excuses for them. I always tell my kids that. But honestly, now that they're older and that, them doing something wrong or against the law is much more of a possibility, I can't say that anymore. I'm gonna tell them that. But honestly, I don't feel like I can just turn my back on them like I would want to, I guess. Or not. I would think I would always stand by them through
Yeah,
all of their
right. And I think why
difficulties.
me and Constance like that story so much is because the characters were so relatable. I mean, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people are parents and have kids, and that's like the worst case scenario of a parent. You do everything you can to help your child become a productive, citizen, contributor to society, and everything you did was wrong, and you it's not so much an indictment against him, but it's indictment against the parent, which is I think why she had the affair, um,
Hmm.
and a lot of things. So I think that's why that story resonated, is because it's relatable. The characters are relatable. You can see yourself in her shoes, and it was torturous. It was torturous. I'm not gonna lie.
Someone told me once that we take too much credit for the good things that our children do, and we take too much credit for the bad things that our children do.
I agree with that. I agree with that. So,
Okay.
okay. So my question was, out of all those stories, which was your favorite to write, and why?
Oh, I think that's a harder question than I'd like to admit. Um, I think that I think that one of my favorites, I'm going to mention two of them, and it's not cheating because I can't really decide between those two.
All right.
One of them is the last story in the collection, which is the choking cock. I think that I love that one because I started writing that story based on um, a story that my grandmother told me when I was very little. And part of that story, I wanted to write a fiction tale around the legend. And part of the legend was about hags and how they moved, who they targeted. All of this was wrapped up in the story that my grandmother told me. And she was the one that gave me part of my love for storytelling. So it always makes me think about her when I refer to the story, when I went back for edit after edit after edit that I did to it before I was happy with it and ready to publish. And there's something about it that I love, the whole skinny, do you know me part of it, where there are these witches that are able to shed their skin and go off and do potentially heinous acts. But what happens when someone finds that skin? Are they then able to put it on and absorb all of that magic? Or is it going to be a torturous trial for them as well? So, and how far would you go to find out the answer to a question that you've always wanted to know? Essentially, that's Grace's issue in The Choking Kind. Her father has died, and her father has kept the secret of her mother and took that to his grave. And she finds someone that has some information for her, so she may be able to find her mother's grave, or if her mother isn't dead. How far would you take it? What would you be willing to do to find out that information? The other one that I love is Doc Buzzard's Coffin.
Oh, was that the first one or the second one?
That's the second one.
Right, right. I thought that was interesting, guys. I'm glad you brought that one up because I like to get some more information on that because he's basically the popularized term is zombie.
Hmm. Doc Buzzard is actually, whatever term you'd like to use, root worker, hoodoo practitioner, witch doctor, whatever term.
So he wasn't dead.
Well, not the entire time of the story. Part of the time, yes. So that's part of the magic system that's in Doc Buzzard's Coffin. Incidentally, I joined NaNoWriMo this year.
Woohoo! I was going to ask you about that.
You'll have to, if you decide to do it, you'll have to send me a buddy request. But my project for NaNoWriMo this year is turning Doc Buzzard's Coffin into a novel.
Oh, really? Because, I mean, there's so many interesting characters. I mean, you got the brother and sister that are twins, correct?
They are twins, yes.
And the sister, the woman, the girl sister seems more mature, if I remember right. And it was the first story I read, so I'm really having to go back and, try to remember their different POVs or whatever. But it was just, I mean, they were just so nonchalant as kids around death or around, I don't know if black magic is the right term or what would be the correct terminology? You say voodoo, roots?
The correct term in Charleston is that we use is root. But other people have used conjure, have used the term hoodoo. And so many times, and this is part of the reason I wrote Doc Buzzard, when you watch Hollywood movies or you read a lot of books, the way they show those conjure magics, hoodoo, voodoo, Santeria, whatever you'd like to mention, they're always shown in such a negative light, and they're always shown as these evil things, and they're always shown as the magic that people of color wield. And I wanted to show that it wasn't only used for those things. My great aunt used to make love potions and luck potions, things like that. And when you grow up around it, it isn't something so strange or so unusual. And that's why I wanted to write that story and to show that it isn't all about slicing chicken at midnight in the middle of a field sort of thing. And Jezebel, who is the main point of view character in that story, has grown up around these things, and so they don't seem so unusual. But in the novel that I'm working on, her training in root starts, and that's going to be the basis for the story. And I had always said that I would never write from a child's POV, and I surprised myself with Doc Buzzard's Coffin because I really do like Jezebel as a character. I think she's really interesting, and I think she's fun, and I think she has a wisdom beyond her years. She is much more emotionally mature than her brother.
I thought so. Right.
Yes, she is, and I think that part of that is the responsibility that's been heaped on her that you'll see later on once that book gets finished. But I think part of it is also where it's set in late 50s, 60s, there was a distinct divide between what was considered girl work and what was considered boy work.
Right, right.
So there was a lot more chores and responsibilities heaped on her versus her brother. So her brother got a chance to be a boy, and that's what boys do a little bit more than she had. She had a responsibility of help me with this, do that. And she just matured a little bit earlier, which is in some ways going to help her and in some ways not going to really help her very much in this book. But whenever that comes out, I'll be sure to share it with you.
Yeah, please. We would love to have you back. Again, amazing writer. Words are amazing, and you've been amazing at putting those words to pen and pad. Um, Constance, did you have another question? Is it my turn now?
It is. You can. I think it's mine.
Okay, go ahead.
So there are a lot of terms that I wasn't familiar with, and like the hag, for example, and you just explained root and conjure man. Do you want? Is there some other monsters or not monsters, but supernatural things that maybe you know that you're familiar with, but like most of us probably aren't? Do you want to go into those terms like hag and root man, conjure man? Were there some other ones that I'm missing?
Well, root is, you can use that term interchangeably with hoodoo, with conjure, um, with magic in general, if you would like to use that term. Um, root worker, root man, witch doctor, all of those I use interchangeably as well. Um, I think maybe one term that I can think of offhand that I used that may not be familiar to a lot of readers is pie.
It's what?
Plat eye, P-L-A-T hyphen E-Y-E. It's in the choking kind, which is the final story in the collection, and it's the animal that is set as a guard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I grew up with the term, but it's essentially a spirit or a spirit animal, if you want to use that explanation. And in that particular choking kind story, I have it as a supernatural creature that's been sort of put together from bits of other creatures to sort of make this amalgamation of a type that is large, intimidating, um, frightening just to look at, but it is something that Grace has to deal with if she wants to find out if her mother's in that coffin or if she isn't.
I found looking through the book, I found a term that another term I was wondering about. Binu, B-I-N-Y-U-H.
Binya, it's a Gullah word. Um, are you a native? Are you a Binya? Have you
Are you
been
native?
here? So
Oh, okay.
and that's what Gullah is. It is a combination of African words mixed with English words, and I think a lot of people mistake it for incorrect pronunciation or Ebonics, if you want to use that term, and it isn't that. It is its own sentence structure. It is a true official language in and of itself. So that term, are you a Binya? Are you a native? Are you from here? I think I used a few other terms in the story to give a little bit more color and a sense of sort of the cadence of the language and the flow of how things are pronounced or how they would look, to because it is a very almost musical language to me.
No,
And I wanted to share part of that with the readers.
I would agree. I would agree. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and segue into my next question. And you tell me if I'm right or wrong about this. But this is just the way that I felt. There seems to be a running theme with these stories. Not all of them, but a large majority of them. that, be careful what you want to put up for to gain the world because you might be in danger of losing your soul, which is very biblical, which I think a lot of people that grew up in the church around Christianity circles would recognize as a truism or a symbol of Christianity. Um, was that intentional, or is that just the way, you can't have it all, and if you are, be careful because everything comes full circle.
I think that karma is something that runs through a lot of religions. But I think that people that I know of who aren't necessarily religious or spiritual do have that belief that karma is a harsh mistress. So you want to put out in the world what you'd like to receive back. And a lot of times that is a large tenet of a lot of religions. But I think even with, and I don't know if I'm quoting the correct book, but I think there is a philosophy going around with The Secret and all those sorts of things of putting energy out in the universe and getting the same type of energy back. But with these stories sort of being set in the American South, the Bible Belt of the country, there is a lot of those undertones of be careful what you wish for. You might get something that you don't expect. And I think that those things are very entwined. Anyone that has lived in the South for any real length of time knows that mindset runs through a lot of what goes on and how people are treated, at least up front. Have I answered your question?
Yeah, no, you have, and karma might be a better, a more apt theme of what I was saying. Where there was a guy that killed his wife, wanted to know which to me it took like cojones, right? So how you gonna kill your wife and you're like, oh snap, forgot to get the bank account, and then resurrect you, be like, I'm sorry how everything worked out. By the way, where'd you put the money? So I was just like, and so he got his. And another story that kind of bothered me was like the a woman that just loved this man, and he was like a two-timer, and she knew it, and the town knew it, and this and that. And so I guess is this where a hag came into play? Is that the correct
Hag
way to say it?
ride.
Right, hag came into play. And so she put a hag on him, and he became shriveled up and lost use of, I guess, his best attribute, if you want to put it kindly.
Yes.
And she's walking out the room, and turns out she didn't love him so much because she was feeling the security guard. And I was like, wow, that's crazy. The dude definitely got his comeuppance, but what was her motivation for doing it in the first place if she was like, oh well, didn't work out the way I thought?
Well, I'll go back to the one about the money first, which is 9 Mystery Rows. For most of my adult life, I have worked in the financial services industry, and I've worked in banks, I've worked in investment firms, I've worked in bank branches on the front line, I've worked in headquarters doing more behind the scenes work. And this story is probably only a 5 or a 6 of stories that I have heard and read about that people do in order to get money from their deceased loved ones. I have heard stories about people impersonating other people, going through great lengths, stealing airplanes, crashing airplanes, trying to erase all existence that they ever lived on the planet in order to get money. And I just didn't think that this one was so far-fetched in the light of that. Some things don't always make it to the papers that happen behind the scenes,
Well,
especially.
because the financial institution want to keep it keep it hush. I mean, because yeah, that's I work in that sector too.
So there are a lot of things and a lot of changes that people will go through in order to access money, especially when they think, if I can just get this done, then I'm set. If I can just get this in my bank account or under my control, then I won't have to worry about anything anymore.
But it's never enough.
It's never enough, and that's why they say that when people want to, if I could just make $20,000 a year more, then I'll be
Right.
good. And that isn't always the solution, because if you know that you're going to be making $20,000 a year more, if you don't change your mindset and your habits, you'll just spend $20,000 a year more
Exactly.
and not be any further than you were
And you could
before.
be further behind
Exactly.
as you accrue more debt to accommodate your new status. Then if something happens, you're a lot worse off than you originally was before you got the more money or the promotion or whatever led to it. But I just thought that was interesting. I was like, okay, those are two stories that kind of struck me as karma or kismet, or however you want to define it.
Oh, absolutely. And the hag ride story, which incidentally is going to be, um, I think I may have mentioned it already, but I probably possibly haven't. There is a short film anthology that is in the making, that is
Oh,
the first of its kind. It is written and directed by all black women. It's called The Seven Magpies, and so there are seven black female horror writers and seven black female directors that are putting this horror film anthology together. And I happen to be one of the magpies. I'm the third one. And the story of mine, they contacted me and asked if I would submit something, and I did. And they said they couldn't choose between two of my stories, so they wanted to write the screenplay based on two of them. So they will be pushing Hag Ride together with the first story in the collection, which is The Watered Soul. So that will be coming to film at some point. I don't know exactly when. I don't have a timetable quite yet, but the screenplay is currently being written. That much I do know.
so are you working on a screenplay yourself? And if not, is that another skill you would like to acquire? Or are you going to stick with short stories and novels?
I'm not going to completely discount screenwriting. It is a different animal altogether. I'm currently working very closely with the directors in order to make sure that the screenplay stays in line with the stories and stays in line with Root, with Hoodoo. Um, but I personally am not writing it. I wanted to make sure that it could be the best it could be, and I've never written a screenplay. So I wanted
Right.
to make sure that someone who had a lot of experience doing it would be able to make it powerful. But I'm pleased to say that I'm being consulted, which is wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I hope you keep close tabs on that because you hear so many stories of so many writers that sign up for paperwork and take the check, and then they're so displeased with what is portrayed on the big screen or on the TV because it's not true to their vision. So, um, kudos to you for allowing somebody else to write the screenplay because that's not your skill set, but also staying in contact with the production crew and the screenwriter. I'm looking forward to you. You're gonna have to come back. Seriously.
And I want to say congratulations. That is every author's dream, I think, to have their vision put on TV or on a movie screen. So I want to say congratulations. I know it must feel pretty good.
It does. I'm excited. And yeah, there are a little bit of nerves there too, but I think that's normal.
So when they contacted you, this is between me, you, and Constance. We won't tell nobody. We promise. Did you punch the air? Did you moonwalk? I mean, anything?
I
Or
don't know. I'm
huh?
not good at moonwalking. I wish I could moonwalk. I'm horrible at that. If I could moonwalk, I probably would have. I think what I did do when I got contacted, it was via email, and I think I read the email about 6 times before it finally sunk in. But I was elated, and I felt like an enormous amount of recognition, and I think I just sat there and stared at the screen for a little while before I jumped up and then ran back to the screen and read it one more time. And I couldn't even respond to it right away. I just went, okay.
Well, it's always good to see your hard work come to fruition, in such a public format. I mean, because you're talking more people watch TV or see movies than read books. Which is
Yes.
a good thing and a bad thing.
Well, I think that a lot of times people just feel that they don't have time to read a book because time is always so precious and it's such a commodity right now. And I think that's why we've seen a rise in audiobooks
Mhm.
because they were a thing years and years and years ago. And now they've made a resurgence because a lot of people feel like I really don't have a lot of free time to just sit there with a book. Or if I am sitting there with a book, my family's going to go, well, what are you doing? You have time to sit here and read a book? You could do these other things. So if you're in your car or if you're on the subway or the train and you have an audiobook, you get the chance to experience it. But when it's a movie, people just go, oh, well, I don't want to bother them. They're watching a movie. It's almost like sacred space. You don't interrupt somebody watching a movie, but you'll interrupt them if they're reading a book.
Hey, I accidentally my think I cut out. Which last part of me did you guys hear? Which last part of my spiel?
Oh, I don't even remember.
Oh, that's not important.
The
It's not
last
a.
part I heard was something, I think it was to the effect of reading books versus watching movies, and why do people that seem to want to, they're more readily willing to get into a movie, and it's sort of
Yeah,
a different medium.
yeah. So it's a different medium, but it's a larger audience, and so what I was saying was that hopefully the people that do see you on the screen, a big screen or small screen, would learn about your books and read those, and that drive them more book sales, and then you pretty much got the circle of life, and the good news just keeps coming, right? Is that the
Oh, that would be great.
yeah? But then you're gonna have to work on your moonwalk.
That would be. I'm going to have to, maybe if I did it in socks, I couldn't do it in shoes. I'm not.
Socks and hardwood floors, you can't go wrong.
That's one thing that hardwood floors and socks, or maybe some really recently scrubbed linoleum. Maybe that would be okay.
There you go. And you're over in England
I'm
now,
going to have
right?
to work. I am in England, yes. I have moved from. That's why I now say, for some reason, the American South. It's become a term that I use in talking about my books and when I do online and written interviews, because when I'm here and I talk about it, I have to say the American South. Obviously, when I talk to people, they know I'm American from my accent, which I think is great, that I apparently have a wonderful accent here. Um, so I'm now used to saying the American South.
How long have you been there?
Um, September was 1 year.
Oh, so not too long.
Not a very long time. I'm still learning a lot. I'm still adjusting to some of the things, but some things just were completely, something clicked and everything fell into place. And plus, I live in South England. So when I say, oh, I'm from the South, then I have to clarify and say, no, I am from the States.
America.
You didn't hear that wrong.
What is a magpie?
A magpie is a bird. It is one of those birds that are just steeped in superstition. I suppose crows are as well, ravens are as well, even to a certain extent owls. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that it's based on a rhyme. And from what I remember in my research, it's quite an old rhyme, has different versions, which sort of happens over the years as people retell it all of the time. But magpies are actually very popular here in England. I can open the back door out to the garden, and more often than not, there's one on the fence or hopping through the yard. But they are sort of portents for things happening. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it is um, one for. Oh, I'm not going to get it right. I'm under pressure. Let me see. I know I'm third, so it's three for a wedding. Um, Actually, I'm sitting here at my computer. There's no reason why I can't look this up for you. Oh, and I also wanted to mention, since we are doing this on Twitter, Seven Magpies is also on Twitter as well, if you wanted to follow them at the Seven Magpies. Here we are. It is one for sorrow, two for mirth, three for a wedding, four for a birth, five for silver, six for gold, seven for a secret never to be told.
Wow.
So
I'm
that is
curious. I
that.
want to read the story that's attached to.
So that is the rhyme, and it's when I told my in-laws that I was going to be involved with Seven Magpies and it was based on the rhyme. They all knew it and they were very familiar with it. So I thought that was definitely sort of a gap being bridged there, that it's something that is fully made, produced. The majority of the people involved with the project are Americans, but it is based on a very old nursery rhyme that I do believe originated here in England. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is where the largest concentration of actual magpies are.
When you say magpies, you're talking
I'm
about
te-
the. I'm sorry.
the actual bird. The
Right.
actual
Right.
bird. I'm tempted to at some point go out in the back garden and take my camera with me and just snap a few real life shots of them.
Because magpies, they pretend usually dark magic or death, or if you read horror, whether they're ravens or magpies or crows, usually when they arrive, nothing good happens.
It's almost all birds except possibly maybe doves, but it's if you've seen The Dark Half, I believe it was starlings. Those birds were a portent of evil coming, crows, magpies, all of those things. And I think they can be sometimes creepy as well. My mother
Yeah,
tells me of how she went to see the birds in the movie theater, and she was leaving with her friend and got scared out of her wits because an actual bird just flew right by them, and she said she almost jumped into the stratosphere.
yeah, they are some scary. Well, I mean, they're not scary outright. They're as far as they're the most intelligent birds, as I understand, and they're one of the few species of birds that can actually use and make tools.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but anytime you read literature about them, or even on TV, when they appear, usually bad things happen. Whether
That
that's accurate to true root or the artist, what I don't know.
I think sometimes we as humans attach that type of portent of negativity and evil to creatures that have high intelligence, because when we see a creature that's doing something that may seem out of the ordinary or give an indication of a high, it's a bit unnerving, and your next thought is, ooh, are they trying to take over?
It is unnerving. It is unnerving. Right. And it speaks to I think what's nerve there's like a guilt complex with it because all the damage that humans, due to the